Well, thanks a lot for talking to us.
Hi.
How's our audio level?
Pretty good. It's a little noisy there, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got the music up.
Yeah.
Which is atypical on a Monday, which is what we usually do.
Yeah.
Where are you guys?
We're at Boston Beer Works.
Next to Fenway.
Oh, okay.
Across the street.
Cool. I haven't been there in a long time. Boston, I mean, that area of Boston. I actually used to work not too far from Fenway.
Really? Wow. Hey, I actually heard are you from Massachusetts or you just lived here for a while?
Well, technically, I guess I wasn't born there, but I moved there when I was about 8. My dad was in the military. He retired, and that's where he grew up. So he moved us back to Massachusetts, and I was there until I was 23. So the formative years.
Right, okay. Good memories, I assume.
Interesting memories.
Okay.
I like Boston, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Massachusetts is good for interesting memories, I think.
Yeah. Hey, your picture has frozen up. Did my picture freeze up too?
No, yours is still going.
Huh. I wonder what's going on. Okay. You guys are just like really holding a pose very well.
It seems to be okay. It looks like we're on a decent connection.
It'll probably.
Anyway, we got the audio, so we should be all right.
Yeah, it'll snap back into life soon, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah, we're not really changing much.
That's it.
So, but just to just a question I had. So your next book is coming out in March?
Yeah, about 7 months, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. Well, it's the so is it kind of I guess we're sort of like, I don't know if this is cart before the horse stuff, but is this so the Deep is about the Titanic, and it is so I guess did you have to do the same amount of research as you did for the Donner Party?
I had to do a metric ton more.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of people that really are into the Titanic and they take it very seriously.
Right.
So, yeah. But at the same time, the thing that's kind of weird is the Hunger was so close to the original history. There was just a couple characters that we added. And of course, I kind of played around with the real lives of the characters, but still it stayed pretty close to the history. Right. And this story has a lot more completely fictional characters in it.
Nice. Yes, we're definitely looking forward to that.
Well, I'm very nervous about it. I think the publisher has very high expectations because, so many more people are into Titanic than the Donner Party, go figure. And, yeah, there's already been, a lot of interest. So.
It's that movie that came out about the Titanic with the love story and the song by Celine Dion.
Yeah, we needed more horror, definitely. So you're filling a vacuum.
Yes.
Return it to its horror roots.
Well, I hadn't seen the movie. I actually had to go watch Titanic just to make sure that I didn't do anything, too close. And then I watched A Night to Remember, which is, I think it was in the 40s or 30s, the night the Titanic sank. And that was pretty interesting.
So Leonardo DiCaprio was actually some kind of monster.
Let's just say we take unreliable narrators to a really different place.
Right.
That's great, yeah.
Cool. Well, just to, because like I said, I told you when we talked before about this. But your story about how you actually came to write The Hunger is really fascinating. I was wondering if you could let these guys know how that all came about.
You mean? And I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing the sound a little bit, so I'm not.
Back here. I was just. Okay. I was wondering if you could just tell us about the story about how you actually came to write The Hunger.
Oh, you mean like the partnership?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I feel kind of sad a little bit when I tell the story because I feel in some ways that, it's like, taking some of the magic out of it, right?
It was such a success.
Well, I had dinner with some friends the other night, and they have a young neighbor who's interested in getting into the publishing business. And they asked if I would talk to him, and I always do, but I can't lie to people. So, I kind of feel, I mean, he was a good sport about it, but, anyway, it's not always what it seems. Like a lot of people think a book is, that's your baby, and, just, it just springs whole out of you, like Athena out of Zeus's head, and you'll just protect it like a mother bear or something. But more and more in the commercial side, not literary fiction, although I don't know, maybe this happens in literary fiction too. It's a much more collaborative process these days. So for this book and for The Hunger and the Deep, they're both in partnership with these two other writers who have their own business. They're not entertainment. They're like media consulting business, basically. So we partnered on these stories. This was their first adult book. They usually do young adult. They're actually both best-selling young adult authors. They also happen to have been publishers in New York, editors themselves for one of the imprints of Penguin Random House. It might have been a young adult imprint, but they left and decided to start their own business. So they approached my agent because they were looking for someone who could write adult, but could also write, had sort of like a literary tone. They wanted it to be elevated, and that sounds like really snotty, but anyway. And everyone thought I'd say no, and I said no. I'm going to say yes because it's a great opportunity to work with people, see other writers' process. It's not without risk because I've never written a novel with another person before. But it turned out pretty well. I mean, it wasn't easy. The first book, The Deep, actually went much, much smoother, much, much easier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Each other now, I guess. Yeah. Okay. But the idea for The Deep, what came from me, we were casting around trying to figure out what the next book would be. And I had just seen this documentary about the dive for I think it was for the Britannic. It was one of the first dives for the Britannic. And they mentioned that a woman had actually survived both sinkings. And I was like, wow.
What the heck?
Wow, I know that.
So that's how the whole thing started. Yeah.
Oh.
So is she up to no good?
Well, originally I thought that the story would center on this woman. Her name is Violet Jessup, and she was a stewardess on the Titanic. She was one of the few women stewards. She was very young. And then the Britannic, which was a sister ship, ended up getting pressed into duty as a hospital ship during World War I. And so she ended up becoming a nurse. I mean, nurses back then weren't necessarily highly trained. So I just decided, like, she was too nice of a woman to, like, put her through hell, right? So the woman character is completely fictional. It's interesting. The Titanic is such an interesting. If you all know the story, if you haven't seen The Unsinkable Molly Brown, you saw Titanic, or if you heard other stories. There were so many really famous people on it. Some who survived, many who died. Just so many fascinating stories. But even as I was doing, there's scenes that have just like throwaway bits that you need to I thought I'll just check the rosters and see if there's some historical figure I can put in. Every single person I looked up was so interesting. And it really just goes to show every person's life is fascinating in some way. We have a book written about each of us.
Right. And just for that, were you doing research? I mean, were you doing research on just sort of like the above deck, below deck sort of first class and steerage crowds? Sort of like encompass the entire sorts of people that are on that ship?
Oh yeah, everything. The nice thing about the Titanic is it's incredibly well documented, and there's even a really good online resource called Encyclopedia Titanica.
Oh, nice.
And they have records on every single crew member and passenger. First, second, and third class, right? And so it was just a ton of research. Oh my God, it's the same kind of restrictions that I had with the hunger, and that it was it's bounded in time and space. So you have to know where the ships are at every point on the journey. You have to, you're within a very tight time. It's like 5 days, I think, for the Titanic, and 4 days maybe for the Britannic.
Mhm.
So you have to watch your timelines and then juggle all the characters.
Right.
And then for the Titanic, there's the added, not so much the Britannic, but for the Titanic, there was the added challenge of the layout of the ship. Because, yes, there are going to be crazy people who are going to take me to task because I was off on something, right? So I had to buy the layout of the decks. I have a hard copy and soft copy.
Was that pretty tough with the hunger, like taking on, because you take on quite a few characters, in sort of like among the actual wagon train, the flashbacks, and all that.
It's an ensemble cast again, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you do the whole, note cards with the yarn sort of separating connecting them
The
all?
wall of madness.
Yes, right. Yeah.
No, I don't.
So,
It's funny. After the hunger, I got so many questions about how did you do the research and how did you manage your notes and all that.
right.
So some people know I am a career analyst, and really what it is a researcher. So
That's one thing about you I did know just from John. It's
So-
really funny because I don't know if he told you that, but we had somebody else drew up a list of books for us that we wanted to do in the future, and so it was a pretty long list, and the hunger was one on that list. And John just out of nowhere says, "Hey, you know what? I think I know Alma Katsu." So I mean, that's how we came to. It was obviously we have to do that now.
well, he was a kid, like really young when I first met him.
Oh wow!
When I saw him again in Boston in DC with you guys, I was like, man, he's aged. Not realizing that I had aged too. Yes.
But yeah, that like I said, that's one thing I knew about you as an analyst.
Yeah. So I use a lot of the techniques that I've learned to be an analyst, and I even now have a workshop that I teach on this for writers. I did the first running a couple months ago of it, but basically, I'm like the opposite of a historian. I don't believe that you have to be super exhaustive to this kind of thing. So I don't write anything down. I do everything electronically, most of it on spreadsheets.
Oh wow!
Okay.
It's easier.
So that's how you kept track of everybody. Just gotta.
Oh, more. I do timelines. I had to have like a minute by minute timeline of the sinking of the Titanic, what happened, same thing with the Britannic, launches, runs. Yeah, just a lot of spreadsheets.
So how did you land on the idea of the hungry ones as the
Sort of the villains.
right,
Yeah.
the antagonists and the hunger?
Well, they came kind of naturally. So, like Louis Keseberg, he actually was, if you read the historical accounts, he admitted to cannibalism.
Right.
And then he recanted, and then he admitted again, and he was dogged by it for the rest of his life. He just seemed like an unsavory guy. And when you read some of the accounts of what happened at the end, because he was the last person to be rescued and taken down, and pretty much everyone suspected he stayed up there just so he could continue to eat human flesh for a while. I'm sure psychologically he had been going through something, but that just, and they suspected that he did murder Thompson.
Right. Yeah.
So he was pretty much a natural.
That was like the part of the just reading the actual case that was just so mind-bending and horrific about it. I mean, just because you understand how people like the soccer team in the Andes, they crash and they got on, they're forced into eating the deceased people that were with them.
Right.
But in this case with Keysburg, it sounded like that's just something you wanted to do.
I guess I try not to think about it deeply too much, but I think that I can understand the trauma. I mean, they were snowed in for 4 months. 4 months is a long time. I mean, even being snowed in for 4 weeks is a long time. And to know that you're, watching people waste away and die all around you, and you got to think that can really wreak havoc with your mind. And so if you're already maybe slow, short of a pack, then it takes too much to get you there, I guess.
Right. So it's the so when you set out to write this book, I guess you knew it was going to be pretty dark.
Right. It was a little bit of a mystery from the beginning, because the partners came to me and they had this general idea. Oh, well, we think it should be, a horror story involving the Donner Party. And they had kind of fixated on this idea of it being like The Walking Dead in a way, but they didn't really know what the horror element was going to be. So we started in one direction. It was honestly, I feel like it's a lot like television, how collaborative it is. So we started with the horror element much stronger and much more definite and much more in the Native American camp. And then they started to worry a little bit because, they're from the young adult community. And at the time, there was starting to be a big pushback on whitewashing and authors writing about experiences that weren't theirs. And even though we had a sensitivity reader go over it, and we did change things quite a bit. I think the partners got very nervous about this. So we decided to make the horror element a lot more ambiguous. Sorry, your picture, by the way, has been completely frozen this whole time. So if I seem like I don't know where to put my eyes, it's kind of okay. I'm like talking to a picture.
That has happened one other time. I'm not sure what the issue is. That happened. I think one of the conversations we had, it was like that. But like I said, as long as the audio is still good.
Yeah, I guess as long as the audio works.
Right. So I was going to ask, what feedback did you get from historians, either amateur or professional, having read your book, and who knew the Donner Party quite well, and any insights you got from them?
So really almost no feedback. One person wrote back with a little quibble they had, and they were absolutely right. I had referred to a house as a Victorian, and the Victorian era did not start for 7 years.
Oh.
So we changed that in the paperback. It got fixed. What happened was it was the flashback scene where Charles is thinking of the confrontation with the next door neighbor. And and that was in Massachusetts, and I was definitely picturing my town, right? And all those Victorians that I grew up around. And so when I was picturing the next door neighbor's house, that's what I was picturing. So my bad. But what's really been gratifying about it is how many readers have written to me and said, because you can't tell the difference between fact and fiction, you don't know where the line is. It's really inspired them to read about the real life Donner story. So that's really been really gratifying.
So you've been contacted by any sort of Donner, Donner geeks that have
a lot fewer Donner geeks than you might think.
Or just disaster geeks, I guess.
Disaster geeks. They're going to start coming out of the woodwork with the Titanic, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
It's actually been a little sad how a lot of people have never heard of the Donner Party. I'm
really?
Yeah. So growing up, they taught it in school, and everywhere I would ask, so did you hear about it in school? And you'd be surprised how many people said no. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Chandler.
She's in my school, sorry.
Oh, say that again?
Yeah, sorry, I can't hear.
I read it in school.
You read it? Oh, in high school.
Yeah.
So you read about it in high school. Yeah. I mean, as a horror reader, and I feel like society's like a little bit less afraid of nature than we used to be.
Oh, definitely.
And this is like man versus nature. Nature wins in the extreme.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're not even warning children. Like people are more in zoos. You hear story people like reaching out to pet the bears and getting their hand eaten things. Things that I don't think would have occurred to us 30 years ago to do.
Right.
Oh, God. No.
So thank you for bringing a healthy fear of starvation and starvation back.
Of nature back to us. We need to be taught to be afraid of it again.
With climate change, we'll probably learn that once more.
Well, you know, I am one of those people that, so for years in intelligence work, I worked on humanitarian affairs, and part of that I had to deal with U.S. citizens who would go running off into disaster areas, thinking we're going to be the white savior, right? So I have very little patience for people who put themselves in harm's way because they're stupid. Hopefully, this book will, but I do think people don't have an appreciation for like just how incredibly rapid and remote it was back then. You know, there was no lifeline.
Right.
Well, I also think that when we think about the westward expansion and Manifest Destiny and the Oregon Trail and things like that, we tend to picture like a long, flat space. We don't necessarily picture mountains and obstacles and things that are hard to get through. We just sort of tend to picture it's a big, flat terrain, but in reality, there were these mountains that trapped the Donner Party.
Yeah. The historical records, especially, you know, they really got bogged down in a couple places, the Wasatch Mountains and the Great Salt Lake Desert, which is the Bible Belt, and other areas that had not been, you know, no wagons had ever gone through them, and they had to blaze trails through incredibly dense forest and that sort of thing. And it really, you know, opens your eyes to how dangerous it can be. So we did a research trip in order to get ready for the writing. My husband came out with me, and we flew to Salt Lake City. We went from western Wyoming all the way to the end of the trail with the daughter. 700 miles.
Did you take the Zephyr through the Sierra Nevadas and all that, past Donner Lake?
Well, we drove up there. Yeah, we drove to Donner Lake, and you know, knowing the story, going there, it was incredibly eerie.
Wow.
So eerie walking through there.
Yeah, it must have been.
Were there any things you saw in the physical terrain that kind of made its way to the book and changed the way you wrote it?
Well, I hadn't finished it at that point, so it didn't change it so much as just maybe enrich it. So the scene at the lake where they're slaughtering the cattle, that came about because when I walked around and I saw the lake and it's just always black, always dark. And I knew that was just a chilling place. And then when you go out to Alder Creek, where the Donners encamped, you see the tree. Under the lowermost branches of the giant tree, and that tree was hit by lightning, and so it's like half charred. I mean, it just looked so eerie and, you know, deathly. Just it chills you to the bone.
Sorry, what time of year did you go there? I assume it wasn't.
We went in March, so not the best time in terms of the book and all that, but when I had time to go. So anyway, but it was so nice. We still talk about that trip.
Yeah, like I said, I took my wife and I went out. We took it's like the existing route of the Transcontinental Railroad out from Chicago out to Sacramento, past Donner Lake and all that. But it was very pretty where we were there. It was midsummer, so it's quite delightful. Probably would have been delightful back then. But
I'm sure.
they just kind of
in the summer.
missed their spot.
Very bad timing.
So have you? So how much of an idea did you have as far as like the mythology of the Hungry Ones? like what they were, and because again, I got some of that I wasn't entirely clear about what they were.
That's kind of where we ended up at to make it a bit ambiguous.
Okay.
The theme of the story is, that any man can be a monster. It's just under what circumstances, will a man be pushed to do something monstrous. When you think about that, that really is shape-shifting, right? Man into monster or monster into man. So I invoked the two different mythologies there. One is the European mythology that a lot of us are used to, the werewolf mythology. So there's a couple mentions of werewolves that especially Edwin Bryant had come across, do werewolves really exist? That's what his experiences were sort of pushing to, where a man transforms into a beast. Then you have the Native American mythology, the Wendigo, which is actually a monster that wears a man's skin. So it's a monster who tries to pass himself off as a man. So that's why those two mythologies were invoked. But and then it ends up with this sort of scientific explanation, right? Or is it a disease that some people process differently?
Yeah, Joe. It was, I think I might have mentioned it before, but I saw a movie called Raw. It was a French film, and it was about this family that has a genetic, some sort of familial trait that predisposed them to cannibalism.
Huh. What was the name of it again?
It's called Raw.
Raw.
Yeah, it's a French film.
I didn't see
It was on Netflix for a while. I don't know if it still is.
I think it is. Yeah, 'cause I saw it recently.
Yeah, because there's a pivotal scene in there where this girl is accidentally cuts off her sister's finger.
Yep.
And then her sister's unconscious at the time, and her sister's just holding up her finger in front of her face, knowing that she should put it on ice or try to save it, and then she just starts eating her finger. And it's a very powerful scene. But I thought of the hunger at that point. I was thinking this just seems like the perfect descendant of the modern day phenomenon of the hungry ones.
I'll have to go look for it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a good movie in its own right.
Yeah.
But it's it made me think of that.
Yeah, it's I mean, the whole cannibalism thing, it's such a strong taboo, right? It just can't help but conjure up very deep feelings in every individual, and some very uncomfortable feelings, kind of both ways, right? So, yeah, it's a thing. The one drag about the hunger is so many people have told me, I'm not going to read it. First of all, Stephen King says it's scary. So if it's Stephen King scary, I'm like, no, that's just advertising. And then they say, well, it's about cannibals, and I'm not interested in cannibals. I try to convince them it's a little bit more than that, but it's a hard sell in some ways. I'm hoping the Titanic's a little easier.
Right.
Well, you could say they're both educational. That's like the great one.
Both educational. I think the thing with the Titanic versus the Donner Party is probably that there's a lot of romance attached to the Titanic, in that you have characters, you have real people who were sacrificing themselves for others, and who were giving up space in the lifeboats for others, and there's this sense of romance to it, and you don't really get that with the Donner Party. The Donner Party is more like this gritty, dirty sort of. We're at our most desperate. We have to survive, and we have to do something horrific in order to do that. There's just no romance in there, and I'm very sorry.
Right. No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I feel, but it's probably not as apparent in the book. There's the romance of the West, which
right. The lure of going west and having a fresh start.
Yeah.
There's that.
Younger generations than me don't have that same association. I grew up in the golden age of television, Western television. And so we all, had the mythology of the West kind of shoved down our throats. Now, if you get that, it's Westworld, and you're going to be killed. So probably not the same feeling. But you're absolutely right. The Titanic is just such a romantic thing, right? It's the Gilded Age, Downton Abbey, and it does have a strong love story in it. But still, the number of people come up to me and say, "Oh, I don't read horror," and I just feel like saying, "Well, that's not." You may say that, but probably most of the TV shows you watch and the movies you watch have a horror element in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have that? Because in The Hunger, there isn't. It didn't seem like you focused too much on the romance of the West. It seemed like most of the time they're having a pretty bad time of being out there. There's that aspiration, their goals, there's
a lot of characters who want to escape from something.
Yes.
I felt so. There was an element, not necessarily of romance, but escapism, saying I can get out of here and start completely clean. And that's a very attractive idea.
Right.
Yeah, honestly, I couldn't think of any other reason why people would do it, right? To do it at the time was just insane, right? You were giving up everything and everybody you knew with very little chance of ever seeing them again. And I do think, having read a lot of the newspapers at the time, there was this sort of, popular notion, go do it, have this adventure. Right. But still, you had to be sort of running away from something too at the same time, I think.
Yeah, I guess kind of analogous to the Central America at this point, sort of like the journey north.
That's a great point.
Also analogous to Europeans leaving Europe and coming to America in the first place, where the idea was glory, God, and gold, which is good. And then you kind of see a lot of that in the westward expansion, Manifest Destiny, Oregon Trail type movement as well, where it's like, oh, I'm going to go out to California and get a bunch of gold, and I'm going to go and get religious freedom. I'm going to go for the glory of conquering the wilderness. Right. So it's like history repeating itself. It's very fascinating.
Sadly, history does repeat. Very much so. It's crazy. The more I research these historical novels, the more I see we're just doomed.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm looking at World War II. We're thinking of doing a World War II story. So, yeah.
Is that a follow-up to The Deep, or is that...
Well, they're all standalones. I think there's a feeling in publishing, and sorry if there's like too much inside baseball here, but there's a feeling in publishing right now that people don't want to go beyond the 20th century. So, World War I is about as far back as you can go right now.
Well, it seemed like The Hunger did pretty well. That was...
Yeah, World War I.
What was that? 1846?
1846, yeah. 1840s.
So, especially if it's... so the last time I checked, the film rights have been bought by Ridley Scott's production company. Is that still the case?
Well, it's a weird thing. So I don't think they're actively doing anything. So I know my partners. So the reason I partnered with these folks is they have incredible success with film rights. So they actually, optioned the rights to Ridley Scott's company before we even had a book deal. So I know, crazy. So they actually have a screenwriter who's very interested in writing, doing a treatment for it, but he is a showrunner on one of the many Star Trek shows.
Okay.
He can't write it until he's done with the season. So I'm a little nervous it's not going to happen. These, it's so hard to get a series made. So I'm actually starting to work with the company that was behind The Walking Dead. And so, yeah, they're very interested if I could do a treatment on the book, and I'm trying to talk my partners into that. But in the meantime, I'm pitching another TV series to them. So it just went out on submission. So keep your fingers crossed.
All right.
Oh, well.
That's a different show altogether.
It is it has to do with current events. So I'm a social media researcher. I've been doing this for about 10 years. And I actually work with some of the leading experts in the field, and they've all been working on the Russian influence campaigns, and this is about the Russian influence campaign. I'm hoping that if Mueller's testimony goes really well on Wednesday, we'll sell it on Thursday.
That's hot.
Yeah, sure.
But if he bombs, and everybody's saying he is going to bomb, then there goes my pitch.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's probably intending on bombing. He really doesn't want to care, and he'd rather it be. But the last time he gave a statement on what was in his own report, it was big news. So
yeah, I just wish I could had a voodoo doll or something that I could make him talk.
Compelling.
Anyway, yep. The things you got to do to cobble together a living as a writer these days.
Yeah, I know. We talked to Grady Hendrix a while ago, and he's the nicest guy. But he was talking about it was after We Sold Our Souls, and before we talked to him, I looked him up. I looked up on IMDb, and he had 4 things going, 4 of his projects in various stages of production. And we talked to him, and he said nothing's going on. He just said everything fell through. It was just, oh man, I thought you were getting his stuff is so. I was really praying that something would go through for him, because he's such a cool guy. So.
Yeah.
We also spoke with Kathy Koja, and didn't she say that the Cypher has been in and out of production hell for decades now?
Yeah, I think
she had said something like that.
I think she's got her thumb on that too. I think she's not willing to let it be some mediocre company picking on.
Yeah, it's really tough, really, really tough. And right now, because of streaming content, there's this huge demand for content. You'd think everything would be getting snapped up, but it's still kind of hard.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, I think it would be. I mean, with all of the channels out there and all the, like you said, all the need for content.
Right.
Because, I would think it'd be sort of a golden age, and I guess it is in a way, but I guess it's still not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, it sounds like maybe did any of you guys go to StokerCon this year?
No, I didn't make it to StokerCon. We just went to, I went to 2 conventions this past, ReaderCon and MeCon.
Oh, okay.
But, no, they didn't have. A lot of people there, but I didn't see any. So that's where you went to StokerCon.
I went to StokerCon and ended up talking to a lot of people about what they're doing in trying to move over to film, because it does seem like, I was really mad for a while. It's like every freaking author I know has their own TV show. Why can't I? That's not true. They don't, but we're all beating the bushes. And then there's a bunch of screenwriters without properties to sell who are just spinning these stories like mad, So it is a lot of competition for those spots on Netflix.
They got somebody like Josh Malerman, who's out of Detroit, right? He comes along with the book and then a movie, or a Netflix movie that blows up. A bunch of people killing themselves by imitating his movie.
Running around blindfolded.
Right.
Can you imagine having that experience? I mean, I'm so happy for him, and it's just, but who has that kind of cultural moment? It's amazing.
Right. And then there's the question of, can he do it again?
Yeah, I haven't asked him about that yet.
I mean, being a one-hit wonder, that's not terrible, but I think you'd rather be like a 2-hit wonder, right?
How do you hit that pin? Yeah. How do you repeat that? The expectations are so high.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tough.
Although it makes me wonder, what would the Hunger Challenge be? Actually, probably don't want to answer that.
I don't think we should answer that question.
I don't want to see a reality version of this, okay? No, I don't care how much money they offer you. Because people would do it.
People would do it, and it would be
barbecue your neighbor. Yeah.
Show up on the Food Channel.
Oh, yeah. My goodness. Who's saying that? Which one of you guys?
You're pitching this to all the wrong stations.
No,
This should be Food Network.
Should be right after Chopped.
Yes.
You guys are great. So after you read the book, we're going to have to, have a little discussion here. Maybe you can help me come up with some ideas to pitch for it. That hasn't gone out to movie studios yet. I'm
Sorry.
Action is.
Well, you do. I saw your book club kid did have a couple of recipes. It's not
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wait a minute. I have an idea to pitch to you. It's right up your alley. Do Mayflower. Mayflower's got great horror elements. How many people have deaths on the way over here? They get over here, they think they're home free. More deaths, more horror.
So like
Mayflower.
Because I grew up, in what I called colonial ground zero in Massachusetts, and I really hated it.
was that what ended in Jamestown?
Jamestown, sure. Yeah, I think Plymouth.
Actually, wasn't there an incident of cannibalism in Jamestown? Didn't they discover
Really?
the remains that
Well, I'm sure she can make that. She can make that happen for us.
One of the earlier ideas we'd been talking about was the lost colony of Roanoke. So I started
Oh, that's a great
on that. That's pretty freaking depressing.
Yeah.
Great story though, and it has Sir Walter Raleigh in it, and Queen Elizabeth, and just a crazy mystery, and the incredibly incompetent governor they sent out there, and just this great backstory. But again, it's like maybe too remote in time for most people to really relate to it. So I don't know if that doesn't get written.
Does anyone want any of this? I'm done.
Yeah. How about
quinoa. It's like hitting like a bomb.
Sorry, I could barely hear.
Oh, sorry.
It depends on if you want historical cannibalism to be your niche or not.
It could be a shared universe with, Titanic has a little cannibalism, and then, it all connects.
Kesselberg keeps showing up. He's a common element.
His kids.
He's the most.
That lady that's on both ships, you can slip her in somewhere on this.
Right.
Yes.
Maiden name is Kesselberg.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping to be able to get away from the disasters a little bit, because it is very, very difficult to thread that needle, to have a terrible enough disaster with a horror element into it.
Is it your plan to kind of stick with horror as kind of a brand? Or?
I seem to write horrible things really well, apparently. But I like it. We'll see. I think Andrew, but I also sold a second series, and that's a spy novel.
Oh, great.
I have a current day spy novel that we'll be writing too, and it's not as horrible as the horror stories. It's not as much fun to write.
I guess your partner is sort of like sort of partnered up with you based on your previous novel tales, like The Taker.
So The Taker series are all my own books.
Right. But based on your experience with those. They approach you, or
Yeah. So the Taker book, even though it didn't make the bestseller list, it got a lot of attention. So it made book lists, top 10 debut novels of the year. It sold a lot of foreign rights. It got a lot of critical praise.
Yeah, I saw an interview somebody did with you at the time about that. It was what's that? I'm sorry. Yes, it still lives on YouTube.
Uh-oh.
I don't remember who it was, but what was it? I'm involved on question.
It was an interesting book. I think it's a rich read, but it was very much a book of its time. And that time was Twilight, right? So, it was more romantic and gothic and paranormal romance, even though it wasn't paranormal romance. And it had a very dark aspect to it. So, very different.
Right. That's all I had.
I don't have much else either.
I had a couple of questions for a minute.
I think Andrew had a last burning question for you.
Except I'm totally blank and I want to ask. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, this was I mean, obviously, I really love the book. This is the second time we've read it.
Yeah.
But so as far as I mean, have you developed post the deep ideas?
Yeah. I'm starting to get used to the rhythm of this. We tuck the book away. It's a lot like a movie in that you work on it and then it goes away for like a year and then it comes back and you've got to do like the editing. Right now we're doing the page proofs.
Right.
And then we'll start to get ready for promotion and you got to remind yourself what the book's about and all that. But just about before that happens, I start panicking, like what is that book going to be about? And I try to make my editor and my partners pay attention and start thinking about something. And of course, they don't want to think about it until the absolute last minute. So I threw around a lot of ideas, but I think we're going to end up with World War II. It's probably going to have something to do with the Japanese internments.
Okay.
That was not meant to show what's going on with the terror season 2. It's about the but it's because I know a lot about that history. My in-laws were interned. So, for 30 years, we've been very close to that whole history. And my mother is Japanese from Japan. She lived in in Japan during the war. So just a lot. I know a lot about the history. So we're probably going to go in that direction.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for making history raw and edgy again. It's too sanitized in school for too long, and you need to bring it back to the bleeding edge.
I don't know. It's always. I mean, like I say, I really enjoyed reading the terror. It was long as hell, but it was really engrossing, and I really got absorbed in it. And it was just being able to identify when someone has done a ton of research and can translate that into, and really wrap it up in a story that can really please a diehard horror fan. That's rare because I've only seen it done a couple of times. And this is one of them. I'm really looking forward to the deep.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to that. I grew up with the very romantic Titanic movie, and so I hated it. I loathed it so much. So I'd really love to see an accurate portrayal of how horrific the Titanic incident was.
Well, I think you'll enjoy this then.
All right.
I'm still looking forward to it. I'm very excited.
Oh, thank you. I can't wait to hear what you think about it.
We will. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again. We'll I'll certainly be keeping track of your work, and good luck with the movie rights and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, guys. It was. I wish I could have heard you a little better. I'm just getting kind of deaf in my old age.
Yeah, for some reason the house music is
very loud here.
Way up tonight.
Yeah.
That's the only reason we on Monday nights.
Well, thank you so much for reading the book and making it your book this month. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, there's some chance we'll read it again.
All right. Well, have a good night, you guys.
Take care. Yeah.